We come to practice wanting to alleviate suffering, our own and that of other people. Most of us come with a very open heart, really caring about people and wanting to be helpful in the world. For most of us, we don't know how to do that, though. Almost 50 years ago, when I first lost my hearing, it was intolerable. I couldn't hear, and it affected the middle ear semicircular canal, so I had no balance. I was dizzy. I couldn't even read to communicate. I felt so isolated. This social distancing is nothing compared to that. I felt so cut off from people. I was not cut off, I felt cut off. So I intensified my meditation. I figured if I'm suffering, I know the path out of suffering. It's to have direct experience of the unconditioned, to find liberation. I will find liberation. At that point, it wasn't for others, it was just for me, to escape this hell I had fallen into. And sure enough, as I meditated, I had some profound experiences, moving into very blissful spaces. Obviously, we can't hold on to that. So I would get up early in the morning. At that point, I had very small babies. First one baby, then a 4-year-old and a second baby, and then a 4 and 7-year-old and a third baby. I would get up early in the morning, meditate and move into very blissful experiences, and then have to come back to everyday reality. I would dash around to that everyday reality for the day, trying to fix this, change that. And then finally, when the children were in bed, I would meditate again and move back into that blissful experience. Did not work. This is not the way to really suffer. But I had developed a real skill at opening into, I don't want to call it opening into the unconditioned, but opening into blissful experiences. At that point, often jhana experiences, just very high energy. I was angry. I was sad. I didn't want to acknowledge how helpless I felt, to myself or to anyone else. Rather, I was determined to cope, and cope well. I had almost a motto. There's nothing that this experience of deafness and loss of balance will stop me from doing, except hearing. I was super mom. I did everything. My children, as they grew up, began to play in the Suzuki music program, the cello. And I learned how to tune their instruments by the vibration. And I was the home, with the Suzuki method, they practice at home and then they have a class. So at home, I was teaching them. I had tapes on the fingerboard of the cello so I could see if they were playing out of tune. And they memorized what the fingering should be of the pieces. I was super mom. Classes with a half dozen little children. I was the tuning mom who tuned all the cellos for the class. How? I could feel the vibration. The other moms could not hear when the cellos were off tune, but I learned how to feel the vibration. Yeah, it was skillful to one degree, but it was also extreme denial. I will do everything. I won't let this overwhelm me. So I didn't allow myself to feel the pain, the fear, the grief. If we don't allow ourselves to feel our feelings, they keep building up. It's very different to feel our feelings and to act out our feelings. If we don't feel our feelings, eventually they get so big that they explode and we act them out. I was able to be loving to my children, but not so much to myself, and not even to Hal. I was just a volcano waiting to erupt. And still I was doing good things in the world. But doing them by excluding myself. No compassion for myself. I was still involved with areas of social protest, civil rights, peace movement. I was doing that also from a place of fix it. No compassion. I learned about compassion in those early days working with civil rights, but not compassion for myself. And if we exclude ourselves, it's not genuine. Finally, in that year before I met Aaron, consciously met him. Certainly I've known him forever. But in that year, I was starting to be more open to the depth of my pain, the depth of my anger and fear. But I still wanted to fix it. I didn't know what to do about it. And I thought, I should be able to do something about it. If I recognize it, I should be able to fix it. Most of you know how I met Aaron. I had really been struggling with the degree of pain and anger, grief, fear that I was feeling. And my helplessness not being able to fix it. I prayed for help. I began picking up information when I meditated. Not sure where it was coming from, but it was loving guidance, advising me to quiet down, to listen to myself. And then finally, one day, I went into the living room early in the morning to meditate. And there was Aaron, just sitting there meditating with me. I could see his face, feel his energy. You know this story, huh? I darted right off into my kitchen. Said, no way is this happening. Either I'm hallucinating or it's real, and I don't want to have to deal with either of it. Which is scarier, that I'm imagining a spirit in my living room or that he's real sitting there in my living room. I had a cup of tea. I went back. I could still see him there, feel his energy. So I sat to meditate. He didn't say anything to me. He just sat there with me. After about an hour, I said, "Who are you and why are you here?" He said, "You're suffering. Let's look at the roots of that suffering." "I'm suffering because I'm deaf." He said, "No. You're suffering because you're so angry that you're deaf, and you don't want to acknowledge the anger." I sat there a while and let that sink in. Finally, I asked him, "Okay, if you're right, what do I do?" He said, "Just be still and let me talk to you. If the ideas I present are helpful to you, use them. If not, let them go." Fair enough. He wasn't pushing it on me, so I was able to listen. In meditation, I began to see how much I hated the experience of being deaf, how helpless I felt before it, how much I wanted to be in control in order to feel safe, and that I was not going to be able to be in control. Just to be present with loss, with grief, with fear, with anger, without trying to fix it. I was so used to dashing back and forth to this blissful space of meditation where everything was perfect, and then back into this pit of helplessness and despair. So unbalanced between the two. He said to me, "Just sit and be aware of what arises." I think the first thing that really became clear to me was grief. And immediately feeling that grief, my saying to Aaron, "How do I fix it?" And he said, "Don't try to fix it. Just be present with it." Quote, "That which is aware of grief is not grieving." What do you mean by that? He said, "Just be present and we'll talk about it." So I began to watch grief, and then anger and fear. He said, "Don't try to figure out which one is predominant in any moment. Just know them all as contracted." And then he invited me at other times, especially on days when I could sit outside, maybe watch a sunrise before the children woke up. Watch the trees blooming, spring blossoms, the flowers blooming. Feel the spaciousness, feel the joy. Just rest in that joy. He asked me then, "Who is joyful?" "Me? Barbara." "Who is Barbara?" He kept asking me, inviting me to go deeper, to begin to see that this who is joyful was just presence, the heart of love, a part of myself that I had completely lost and excluded in those years. Love is joyful. Awareness is joyful. I began to get a sense of what it meant. I began to see that I had a choice to move into the habitual pattern of trying to fix and control as a way of overcoming the feelings of fear and helplessness, or just to be there and watch fear, helplessness, grief, and to begin to see the simultaneity. Right there with the grief was that which was not grieving. Right there with fear was that which was not afraid. Right there with feelings of helplessness was the one who felt empowered, not because I, as ego, could control things, but because the essence of me was love, and love is power. And I knew that. Somehow, that just resonated deeply. I knew it. Gradually, I stopped shifting from one extreme to the other and built up more tolerance to be present with my feelings of helplessness, anger, despair, grief. Just to breathe and hold space for them. And each time I did that, I just got a kind of energetic hug from Aaron. Yes, that's it. Keep going. I began to have confidence. I know how to do this. I remember this goes back, way, way back. I remember meditating, and every time I tried to meditate, there was what seemed to be a huge wall, a brick wall. So there were intense feelings of fear and grief. And I had the feeling that if I could get to the other side of the wall, I would find something much more open-hearted. But I was also terrified. What did the wall protect me from? Could I really move myself, my energy, my awareness beyond the wall? So I started to see the part of me that wanted to maintain the wall. What did it protect me from? Looking back, I see that I took some refuge in a feeling powerless. There was a kind of, I can't help it. What happened to me is not my fault. So if I'm afraid and angry, there's nothing I can do about it. Instead of touching more honestly on the, yes, I chose to get stuck in this powerlessness because I'm afraid of my power. I began to see that I was afraid of my power because I was so angry, and that power could destroy. And then the sudden insight, what if I allowed the experience of my power, right there with the anger and desire to destroy because of the anger? What if I allowed the experience of power that aspired to healing? Could I really touch that power? I remember sitting in my living room morning after morning after morning, and Aaron saying, this solid brick wall, just take one brick out and begin to peer through. What's on the other side? I started to see light and space on the other side. It terrified me. I would stick the brick back in, go back into a dark place. Aaron would say, shh, take the brick back out. And another brick, and another brick. gradually, compassionately opening this walled-off heart. I was still terrified. I began to have dreams of a giant surf coming to the beach. In my dreams, in my meditation, and huge waves that would drown me. Every morning I would go down to the beach in my meditation. So I opened this wall. I could see through it a bit. I was allowing in more experience of the pain that was there and the fear that was there. But I still didn't know how to fix it, and I wasn't about to let it all in unless I knew that I could handle it. I sat on this beach in my meditation day after day, watching these towering waves, and with some awareness that I needed to get up and wade into this sea. Every morning I would break into a sweat when I tried to meditate, terrified. And Aaron would say to me, just take your time. When you're ready, you wade in. And I would get my feet wet and come running back to the beach and look at these waves towering over me. Finally he said, let Barbara, the good swimmer, take over. Just wade in and dive under the wave and come up in the calm water beyond the breakers. Finally, one morning I found myself able to do that. I think it was just the result of the gradual bringing compassion to myself. Instead of telling myself, you should be able to do this, compassion for the fear and pain and loss. Obviously, I was sitting in my living room, but the surf seemed very real. I waded in and said, okay, now this is the time, and I dove under these breakers and came up in the still water beyond. And then I did it again and again and again until I trusted that I could do it. I could face my fear. I could face my grief. I could hold presence with it. As I sat there on the beach after these repeated experiences, finally I began to let in true compassion for myself. For this young woman who I was, age 29 actually, when I lost my hearing. For the enormous change in my life, for the pain. I realized that in all those years since I had lost my hearing, it was about 10 years later at this point, in all those years, I had never let myself cry for that loss. I was too busy saying, I will cope, I will be strong. I had never allowed myself into my heart. And I just broke down and cried. I spent a week very tender, just holding myself in my heart. I shared it with Hal. He held me while I cried. We both cried because he all along had been able to see how I was trying to be stoic and closing my heart to myself and to him. I couldn't feel my own pain. I couldn't feel his pain. This was the start of healing. At this point, my meditation began to change. In times of deep practice, I still could access these experiences of the unconditioned, experiences of bliss and light and joy. But there was no longer so much clinging to them, because I didn't need them as armor or wall to break off the experiences of pain. I started to be able to allow the two to merge. The experiences of joy and light, and the experiences of sorrow and fear. And to see how they interwove and were part of each other. This was the real start of healing. I was able to look back at my life and at the strong, I'm looking for the right word, duality I had created. Good and bad, right and wrong. With so many things. With the civil rights, I'm right, we're right, they're wrong, etc. The judgmental qualities of it. I could see how much I had judged myself, how much I was judging others. It took time, of course, but gradually my heart softened. As I began to be able to rest in these profound experiences of the awakened heart, I also began to be able to touch deeply into the experiences, not just of my pain, but of the world's pain, without believing that I had to fix something. Just our pain, the pain, and holding it with love. Fast forward quite a ways. At that point, I had no terminology. I had a strong meditation practice, but really no awareness of Vipassana. Just shallow, subtle awareness of Vipassana, no knowledge of Buddhism. Years later, with Aaron's help, I began to reflect on the experience of the three kayas. Those of you in Dharma Path are familiar with this. Please forgive the repetition for those of you who know about it, but it feels like an important teaching to share. Kaya, K-A-Y-A. The word literally means body. Dharmakaya as the awake body. The ultimate unconditioned body. Nirmanakaya. Nirmana means form. Nirmanakaya as the form body, the conditioned realm. In between them is Sambhogakaya. This is often translated as wealth body. Wealth, because if you will picture a bridge with the ultimate on one side and the relative on the other, this bridge doesn't just rest on top, it has footings that go deep. into the ground, going deep into the mundane world, going deep into the bliss of the ultimate. And the bridge is the wealth body because it ties them together. Based on my earlier experiences, Aaron guided me in how to find balance on that bridge. I could see how, years earlier, I had been rushing from one end to the other, moving into those blissful experiences of profound meditation, and then rushing back to try to fix things in the mundane world, barely touching the bridge, just one side to the other. So I started to explore from the deep experiences of the awakened heart, allowing myself to hear the pain. Not my pain, the pain. My pain and the pain in the world. And to allow myself, while staying present with this radiance and love, to bring myself back over the bridge a ways and to look out on the conditioned realm and ask myself, what is needed here to support healing for myself and for others? I also began to see when things were really crazy in the world, the outer world and my world, that I could stop, not necessarily meditate and move into some way out experience, but stop and remember. As love has put it, I am love. I am light. I remember the experience of being love and light. And I accept the responsibility. This is who and what I am, what we all are. And so when I'm in the middle of this frantic experience, instead of running around tearing out my hair and yelling and banging my fists or kicking my feet, to just stop and say, in this moment, where is love? Where is light? Bring it from there down to here, to this place of darkness, of being. Gradually, confidence grew. I would not say my confidence. This wasn't a matter of an ego saying, I can do this. Rather, it was confidence in this awakened heart that is my essence. Trusting, I am this light. We are all this light. And it's possible to hold both sides together. And to bring light where there is darkness. And to see back into the darkness from the place of light. To hold them together. To live stably from this Sambhogakaya, this bridge. For those of you who have been practicing with me for many years, you know this sounds familiar. We've been teaching this for a long time. I see it as the highest fruit of practice. That fruit, not just to have a full awakening experience and become an arahant, but truly to live from the bridge, knowing increasingly, with increasing stability, who and what we are. And how to use that truth to bring healing. I want to use a different word. To support, not to bring. It's not so much a doing. It's just a holding space for inviting the expression of healing in the world, in whatever ways it comes. whether it's from hatred, bigotry, war, whether it's from sickness. Inviting the ever-perfect increasingly to reveal itself through our own awakened hearts. We can do this. Not only can we do it, but the way I see it now is this is why we're here in incarnation, literally. Because at some level we have agreed not just to wake up, but to wake up in ways that support the highest good of all beings. And awakening consciousness on this earth and everywhere. Some years ago, I guess it's about 15 or maybe more years ago, 15, 20 years ago, I had a severe infection in my leg. Cellulitis. It landed me in the hospital. Very, very sick. I had a high fever. My leg was very swollen. Very painful. They tried one IV antibiotic after another, and the infection was not responding to any of them. The infection was creeping up my leg, first down near my ankle, and then up past the knee, and finally up into the lower, then the middle, and finally the upper thigh. The whole leg grossly swollen, and it was excruciatingly painful. I had reverted back to the fix-it. I knew better. I can fix this. No compassion for myself on the pain I was experiencing. Finally, the doctor said to me, if your whole system does not start to respond to the antibiotics, and the infection go down, we're going to have to amputate the leg before it gets any higher and begins to endanger moving into the organs in the body. So to save your life, we will need to amputate the leg, way up there at the middle thigh. I felt despair at this. Why can't I fix this? What's wrong with it? I've had so much spiritual practice, and I know about healing, and I should be able to fix this, and the pain shouldn't bother me, and blah, blah, blah. Heart totally closed to myself. That night in the hospital room, the bed next to me had been empty, and I was in so much pain I couldn't sleep. I was sitting up in bed meditating, trying to escape into some blissful place and get out of my body, which I could do temporarily, but couldn't hold it out. They wheeled a patient into the room, a woman who obviously had just had a leg amputated. It was like 2 a.m. The curtain between the beds was pushed aside as the staff was working on her. She was obviously in pain. I could see not only the newly amputated raw stump, but could also see that the other leg had previously been amputated. There was a huge shift. I began to meditate, thinking about all the people in the world who had lost a leg that day. In war, to earthquakes or landslides, to mechanical accidents, just holding them in my heart, and it shifted from why me to why not me. We're all part of this together, this human experience of loss, of suffering. And then the shift, one leg here, to heal not for me, but for us all. Allowing my compassion for all these people who had lost their legs with so much agony, to open my heart to me, and my compassion for me to open my heart to them. One leg to heal for us all. I spent maybe 2 or 3 hours then, from like 3 to 6 a.m., just sitting in bed with metta. For the first time, my heart really opened to myself and my pain and my predicament, without grasping or fear, just tears pouring down. The pain of human experience, of human suffering and loss, and that there is freedom. For the first time in that almost 2 weeks of this infection, I stopped feeling fear or anger. My heart was just filled with compassion. I knew whatever happened, it was okay. If I lost the leg, I would lose the leg. If I died, I would die. But I also saw the leg did not have to be lost. That healing didn't come from willing it to be so, but from opening my heart and finding the direct experience of the ever-healed. Right there with the pain. What is this ever-healed? We can't get to it by hiding out in the Dharmakaya, because then we can't see the pain of the Nirmanakaya. And we can't get to it by rushing through the Nirmanakaya weaving a sword, but only by sitting still in the center of the bridge and holding both and knowing our capacity to experience both the brokenness, the grief, the pain and fear, the anger, and the ever-healed, the ever-whole. That radiance and love and completion of the Dharmakaya. And we can do this. This is the fruit of our practice. I hope for you it won't be as dramatic as it was for me. Needless to say, next morning, the infection started to go down. You see me with 2 legs. They had tried a new antibiotic 24 hours earlier, and they were giving me till that next morning to see if it would work. And now you might say, well, it's just because of the new antibiotic. Nothing else mattered. But of course it mattered. Because I was no longer fighting with myself or grasping. I was open to experiencing and knowing the ever-healed, and then inviting the body to manifest that ever-healed. We do have that power. We have the power to choose love, to be love, no matter what's going on in our lives. But to do that with deep compassion for the pain and fear and sorrow that we may be experiencing. Neither negates the other. They have to come together, right there in the middle of the bridge. It's a beautiful practice. And as I look back now, for me it's what I came to this incarnation to do. to win the duality between relative and ultimate, to live knowing that I, as the bridge, each of us as the bridge, can bring both together and help this world to evolve into the Eden that it was meant to be. A place where all beings truly can move beyond suffering. It's possible. Aaron's Goddard, if it were not possible, I would not ask you to do it. He has said that to me so many times, and I thank you, Aaron, because each time you've said it to me, it's touched my heart and reminded me. Not I, but love makes this possible, and we can all do it. Thank you.